Well, first of all, with free software, that no matter how poor the person is at home, they can legally use the software on their computers at home. One of the problems I find is that in places like the telecenters that use proprietary software, is that the people that use it then go home and say, gee, I'd like to use some software like this on my own system, but they don't have the money to pay for it. And that makes them software pirates. It means that they're breaking the law using that software at home. But if they use free software at the telecenters, then everything that they learn at the telecenters could be done legally when they were able to afford the computer system at home. An example of this was a man who was teaching his students about digital photography and was using Photoshop. He could afford the $700 for Photoshop, but his students could not. And so I introduced them to GIMP instead, and everything they did with Photoshop, they could do with GIMP. And that was good. It's the best way for education, but it's also good because a lot of times people have needs that can't be provided by commercial software, and even less by commercial software that could afford to do it, because as a company they can only afford to do certain types of engineering and afford to treat certain types of markets. So for example, Microsoft supports about 50 different languages in their products, but Ubuntu supports over 200 because they can have volunteers do the translations of the software that they need. So one of the first implementations of a word processor in the Swahili language was OpenOffice, because the Swahili people could actually participate in the translation themselves. And these are the types of things that people need to think of when they think about free and open source software. Well, again, I believe very strongly in country autonomy, that a country, particularly one the size of Brazil, should have control over everything which their country needs to move forward. Now, obviously, very small countries have problems with this. Liechtenstein can't possibly produce everything that they need. Monaco doesn't produce everything they need. But it is better for a country, both economically and for their own autonomy, to control things, and particularly things which are necessary for their existence. Software is no longer a luxury. At one time, we could do all of our transportation and all of our calculations using hand calculators and slide rules. We can no longer afford to do that. We can't do that anymore. It's impossible. We need software. And therefore, software has changed from being a luxury or an accelerator into something which is a necessity. A country the size of Brazil or other countries in a geographical, geoeconomic area cannot afford to have control of that software outside of their country. Free software is developed all over the world. Anybody has access to it. Anybody can see how it's made. Anybody can change it. Even Cuba uses free software and has access to the source code for it in a legal basis. So these are things that people have to consider when, as a country. It also helps to enable local developers, which means that local people get paid instead of sending the money outside of Brazil. Now, I know a lot of proprietary software people say, oh, this is we generate $12 for every dollar that goes outside of Brazil in proprietary software. Well, my question is, why are you sending that $1 out of Brazil? If that $1 going out of Brazil is times a billion times, that's $1 billion a year. And that $1 billion a year would pay a lot of Brazilian programmers to do programming. So I think that, and everybody knows on an economic basis that a dollar that goes out of your economy is like having $10 inside of your economy. Because when a dollar that goes outside of your economy, it no longer pays for local food, local housing, and local taxes. So keeping all of that money as much as possible inside of your local economy makes sense to me. Well, it is better for the whole community because I try and tell the free software community that we should be stressing the term free as in freedom and not free as in cost. I've known Richard Stallman for over 25 years, and not a single time has he said you shouldn't be able to make money with free software. But after the software is written, it should have the freedom that people need to make it useful to them. So that's the real message. And a lot of people think that free software is simply without cost. And my knowledge of 40 years in the computer industry is that there's nothing that comes without cost. Even a mother's love has some cost. One of the reasons why I really liked the project One Laptop per Child that Nicholas Negroponte had was that Nicholas made people start thinking about bringing the internet to everybody, even the smallest of children. It wasn't the computer that was the most important thing. Nicholas would have done the project using a tin can and 2 strings if he could have. But he recognized that bringing the internet to these people was the most important thing. Getting the children to talk to each other across the internet so that a child in Africa could talk to a child in England, could talk to a child in Brazil, so that they could start communicating and they could get to know each other. So sometime in the future, when perhaps their governments weren't getting along, the children could say, "Oh, pardon me, but I was just talking to this person. They're not so bad. They all want to have the same thing, a good life for themselves and a better life for their children." The internet is information. Maybe some of these children did not have clean water. Maybe they did think that disease was created by black magic. But this is something that information corrects. You boil the water and disease is created by germs. This is what we should be getting across to people. We should be having them use the internet to learn how to grow more food. The internet brings information. Information brings the ability to use it and the ability to capitalize on it. That's the most important thing.